Welcome to the only Danish podcast about pro wrestling. And this is a very, very unique journey that I'm going to take you on because I'm going to take you on a travel into the world of Rika Wildlee Barker of the Bizzare. And normally I'm doing the introductions to which town he comes from, but as this character says, he's from your town. So welcome, Rika Wildlee.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is a blessing to be able to come upon your podcast. I have always been a fan of far off podcasts from where I am, and I enjoy seeing people like you reach out to people like me and make it known to the world that the Barker of the Bazaar exists. So thank you for having me on.
But you are more than welcome because we would like to take our listeners to parts unknown. And this is really some parts that they have never been on or never listened to before. So, who is Rika Wildlee?
Well, that's a story that I have to start as I was young. I was 8 years old when I fell in love with professional wrestling, and traveling my time as I grew up, here, there, and far. I only fell in love with it that much more because it drew me each and every week to the squared circle, knowing that that's what I wanted to do with my life. That's the direction I wanted to go. So the Barker of the Bazaar slowly grew into an adult and became a professional wrestler in the United States. But the fact is, the Barker of the Bazaar is a carnival barker. I travel from town to town. I give back to the fans. I draw them near and dear with my lights of bright, and everyone knows when I step inside the ring, the lights always shine brightest at match time. That is who the Barker of the Bazaar is.
Oh, very, very interesting. But that Barker is, didn't you feel at first a little bit misunderstood?
Oh, most definitely. Nobody understood the gimmick. Nobody understood the character. But see, what people, especially the newer generations, really don't understand is that the pro wrestling that you know and love, that you see on your screen every Monday, started at the carnival. It was a sideshow attraction way back when. It started here where I am. It started as a sideshow attraction, seeing two luxurious characters face each other and do what they do best and captivate the audience. So, with that said, I thought about bringing it right back home to where it all began, the carnival. And that is what I have done.
So, very, very interesting. But could you tell us a little bit more about your background story? Because you just gave us a little glimpse of it, but I would really love to know much more because it's so
Ye-
fascinating.
yes, yes, yes. So, let's see. In 2019, I had the opportunity, actually in 2012, I had the opportunity to go and become a professional wrestler, and it didn't happen then. I went, some financial, things happened, and it just wasn't the plan then. But fast forward to 2020, and me and my wife had just got married. We were in Cancun, Mexico on our honeymoon, and I looked over at her. We're sitting on the balcony. We're feeding the birds. We're having the most, storybook romantic situation going on. And I look over at her and I say, hey, what would you think about me really, really chasing this pro wrestling dream? Because I was 30 at the time. And, at that age, it's not something that most 30-year-olds go, hey, I want to start getting beat up for a living. It's like, yeah, but I asked her what she thought about it, and she was like, look, if you genuinely have it in your heart to chase that dream, then who am I to stop you? And she has been one of my biggest supporters throughout this whole journey. But I was going to go to the state over from me, which is Texas, and I was going to go to one of their schools, which is like 5 or 6 hours away, one way trip. And I was going to go over there and join their academy and get my license and all of that good stuff. And I was kind of balancing finances to see what I could swing and everything. And not 30 minutes after that, I had two of my very good buddies. One is my best friend, Timmy Renz, aka Landfill, and the other one is Brandon Randall, aka Logan Wade. And they messaged me on Facebook and was like, "Hey, did you know there's a wrestling school that just opened up like 15, 20 minutes up the road?" And I was like, there's no way. I was like, there's no way. If there was a wrestling school, I would know about it. I'm like the biggest wrestling fan in my area, and I always have been. But they messaged me, and I looked them up on Facebook, and they had just opened their doors. This is during COVID, when everything was going on with that. And they had just opened their doors, and me, Logan Wade, and three or four other guys was the first group to go through that school and get our licenses once I got back to the States from Mexico. I went and sat down with the booker of the whole UWE, United Wrestling Entertainment Academy. I went and sat down with him, me, and these other guys, and we all signed up for the school, and the rest has been a uphill journey, I can say, but amazing nonetheless. So that's how Rika Wildlee came to be on your screen now. There you go.
Okay, that's fantastic. But Rika, can you indulge us a little bit about how you develop your wrestling style at the wrestling school? But one thing is being a wrestler. You have to have
Yes.
this unique style of wrestling.
Well, it's one of those things, there's been a billion clown gimmicks, okay? But I don't consider myself the average clown like Doink the Clown back in the day and all of that kind of stuff. That's why instead of calling myself Rika the Clown, I call myself the Barker of the Bazaar, because I'm more of a carnival barker than I am a clown. And when I get in the ring and the audience is already just like wowed because of the lights and the mask and the whole nine, I get in the ring and I say my style is more like old school Eddie Guerrero. That is what I kind of style my stuff after, because he is one of my biggest inspirations. Him, RVD, there's a couple more, but they're my biggest inspiration. So in ring, that is who I style myself after. And to give back to the audience and show them that I can technically wrestle, but I also could do my flippy acrobatic type stuff to get over with the crowd, depending on who I'm in front of, and this, that, and the other. But it just makes me happy to be able to get into the ring and perform for these people and give them everything that I can at 34 years old. So there you go.
Okay, quite interesting, because going from the inspiration of Eddie Guerrero, RVD, and so on. So could you take us a little bit forward in your career and telling us about the first match when you stepped into the squared circle?
Whew, yes, the very first match I had was against Punk, Sinister, and X Storms, the Dread Express, before the Dread Express, but it was Rika Wildlee, and at the time he was the hateful one, Cody Hawkins, and we tag teamed together, and I went in and was my heart was beating out of my chest. I'm sitting behind the curtain. I'm waiting for my music to hit. And when it finally hit and I got to step through the curtain and they got to see, this is before the lights. All I had was my jacket, my mask, and my top hat. And I go out there and the audience is captivated. They're, wondering what they're going to see from a character such as me. And I get out there and I take my bumps and I do my moves and I end up stealing the show. And it just, that right there cemented what I wanted to be 100%. Wrestling has always been there on the forefront, but once I got that adrenaline rush and that little bite from the audience and I got it sunk into my soul, I knew that day that I was like, this is it. This is all I want to do. This is where I want my heart to set for the rest of my life. Or at least as long as I can, because I don't know how long my body's going to be able to take it.
You never know about your body. But Rika, if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the other matches that have shaped your career as the Barker of the Bizzare?
Oh, yes. Well, one of my favorite matches and the most hardcore match that I've ever had was a Singapore cane match in Center, Texas against the Gatekeeper. Okay.
Oh,
So me and him have had a 5-match rivalry so far. We went against each other 5 different times. Matter of fact, we're going against each other again in Fort Smith, Arkansas, February 10th. So it'll be our
oh,
6th match. And me and him have had a deep set rivalry for a long time. And he is one of my best opponents that I've ever went against, because every time I think I can get one over on him, he always pulls a quick one. He always shows me something that I didn't know about myself, along with his style. So you have people like Gatekeeper that has helped carve who the Barker is, because I always got to pull out something new from my bag of tricks to get over on the Gatekeeper. But there's also been other matches that I went all the way to Ohio, and I wrestled at the Gathering of the Juggalos, which
oh.
is for the band ICP, Insane Clown Posse. They're a huge band over here in the States. I don't know how far out they reach, but they have put on a 5-day concert similar to Woodstock. And
Oh,
yeah, and they have a big wrestling event up there, and there was 30 men that got chose out of all the tryouts, which there was a lot of different tryouts. And I was one of the 30 in 2022 that got picked, and went up there, and there was like 17,000 people, I believe, that was at that event. And that's the biggest crowd I've ever been in front of, and it was just mind blowing, mind blowing. But
but why
that's
did you get picked by that out of all the other wrestlers? What was it
well,
that they
there
said
was
we want Rika?
tryouts. There was tryouts that
Oh,
they went up there, they paired everybody up, because like I said, there was a lot of different guys. They only chose 30. They paired everybody up, and they had spectators outside that was looking at your wrestling style, looking at how fluid you was in the ring, looking at your gimmick, looking at what would get over with the fans, especially in a place like that, and everything. And I guess they just liked what they saw as far as how active I was in the ring, not only
mhm.
with my moves, but with the crowd as well. You know, and I guess that's one of the reasons I ended up getting chose for the 30-man battle royal at Bloody Mania 2022.
So how was that battle royal? How did it
Whew.
went?
It
Yeah.
well, usually a battle royal or something of the sort, like a Royal Rumble type situation, they usually come out one at a time. Every 90 seconds, you get another opponent come out. This is not the way that one was ran. They put all 30 men in the ring at one time. There was 30
Oh,
men inside the ring at one time, and they just said, "Ring the bell, go."
damn.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was definitely wild, no pun intended. But it was one of those situations that you just gotta kind of roll with the punches, and there was no real talk before the match happened. It was just like, here's something that they want to do during the match. Here's something that this guy wants to do during the match. But overall, stay in until you feel it deemed necessary to go out. They already had everything set in place as far as what
Yeah.
is behind the curtain, but um they let everybody kind of have their own little moment in front of the crowd, their own little situation in front of the crowd, to make sure that the fans remembered your gimmick and your character. So it gave everybody a little highlight during the match, which was great.
So how did the fans react to you? How did you
Well,
interact with them?
at this time, luckily, they enjoyed the gimmick. I mean, I didn't hear any negative comments or anything like that. They enjoyed what they saw, but I didn't get to have an entrance. So, see, I only wear this, the lights and the top hat and all that for my entrance. I take it
Oh,
off
yeah.
when I get in the ring. I don't wrestle with it on. So seeing as they just put us in the ring and was like, "Ring the bell, let's go." I didn't get to have an entrance, so I didn't get to wear my lights out. I didn't get to wear my top hat out. I just come out in my tights, my boots, my shirt, and that was it. And they said go, and we went.
So,
So I mean,
but
but the fans
Rika,
loved it.
Yeah, but Rika, let's talk a little bit about your character now, because as you were just telling, the the outfit, the hat, everything is so important for your entrance, so important
Very much
for
so.
the audience to react to you. So how do you use that?
Well, that's the thing about having a gimmick as bright as mine and as just kind of over the top as mine is. When I come out through the curtain, they automatically are drew to the character strictly because you can't miss the lights. Look at me. I'm a walking light show. So I
Yeah.
mean, they can't miss it. They already get involved with my character from the curtain to curtain. Whether I go in there and I have an amazing match, or I go in there and I have a crap match and it just is a botch fest. God forbid, I don't want that to happen. But even if it's not the best match in the world, they're going to remember the guy with the lights. They're
Yeah.
I'm going to leave them with a memory every single time, regardless of how the match goes. And that's what I want. I'm going to be stuck when they're driving home at nighttime and they're after the show and they're talking about everything that they saw, the kids, the wife, the husband, everybody. They're going to go, what about that one guy with the lights? That's
Exactly.
that's what I want.
So
Captivation, not just in the ring, but out as well.
so how would you react if the audience does not react to you the way they are supposed to? How do you handle that situation?
See, I'm open minded enough to understand that everybody's not going to get the gimmick. Everybody's not going to get behind it. That's the way wrestling works. You've got some that really, really dig it, and you got some that are just like, it's whatever. But the fact of the matter is, whether you're cheering me, whether you're booing me, whether you're sitting on your hands and just waving them in the air or whatever, you're reacting. And that's all I want. I don't want you sitting there listening to crickets. You know what I mean? I just,
No.
I need you interacting some way, shape, and form. I've been booed, I've been cheered, I've been, talked down to, and all of this kind of stuff. But the fact is, you're interacting, and that's all I want. As an entertainer, as a wrestler, as an athlete, and all of that. That's all I want is for you to interact, and it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. It's all interacting to me. So
So now, Rika, we have talked a little bit about your matches with the Gatekeeper, the Battle Royal, but do you have other key matches that have shaped your career as the
yes,
Barker of the Bizzare?
I had I think it was 3 or 4 match rivalry with Xavier Storms and or X Storms now. He was Xavier Storms at the time, but he's X Storms now. But he was the UWE light heavyweight champion for got to be over a year. And me and him had a long fought rivalry to where every time we went against each other, somehow, some way, I was getting the one up, or I was sneaking a win, or I was getting him somehow disqualified, or some way, shape, and form until eventually I ended up winning the UWE light heavyweight championship from him. And in Gina, Louisiana, it was an amazing moment because I got my parent, my dad, and my folks to come and watch me win this championship. So it is a very, very pivotal highlight in my career. It's something that I hold near and dear to my heart for the rest of my life. But I got to win that light heavyweight championship from X Storms, and you know, carried on to other matches and other things. And now, since I've actually got to branch out and travel to other states and work other places, I've had all kinds of different matches against a lot of different kinds of gimmicks. I've went against other clowns 2 or 3 times. I've went against scary gimmicks. I've went against over the top, just whatever gimmicks. But the fact is, as long as we can have a good match, I'll face anybody. There's no one certain match that I think got me over in any particular sense. But if we can go out there and potentially steal the show, that's all I'm about.
So it's interesting because every wrestler talks about having a good match, but what is a good match for Rika Wildlee?
A good match, and I can simplify this in simple terms. A good match to me is coming through the curtain and walking out the curtain the same exact shape. Going out there, going through the curtain in good health and good function, and then leaving the ring after the match, win or lose, in the same shape. Just going out there and giving the fans 100% of what we've got to offer. You know, if there's 5, 6, 7 matches on the card, you know, you've got to do something to stick out in their mind once, like I said, once they're riding home at nighttime and they're talking, they're reminiscing about going over this show that they just watched and what they saw and the highlights that they enjoyed and all this kind of stuff. You've got to do something that sticks out in their mind. And if you can do one thing that makes them go, oh my God, you know, just like mind blown. If you can do one good thing out there to stick out in their mind, then I think we've done a good job. And as long as I go back through the curtain at the end of the night in the same shape I showed up in, I think that's a good match.
But now we have talked a lot about the positive things about pro wrestling, all the good stuff. And that's the best way to talk about wrestling. But what has been your most unmemorable moment of your career until now? Something you want to forget and say, well, it never existed.
Yeah, well, there's been a couple different shows that I've ended up working that wasn't up to par with what I think I have to offer. And not that it was anything bad, but there's been a couple shows I've worked to where I couldn't really understand the guy I was working because of I'm pretty sure he was a Mexican guy and he was a Spanish guy, and the language barrier there, you know, yeah, the language barrier there, and for us to be talking to each other in the ring about things we're doing and stuff like that, it was just kind of a flip-flop fest, you know, if I could put it like that. And that right there is one of those kind of matches that I was just that I would love to just wipe away, just be done with.
Erased.
Yes, a race. Yeah, yes, yes. Not that it wasn't a good match. It's just I think we could have done way better if we could have had more time to understand each other and could have understood each other a little better. But that's just one of the few that I think that I would like to just erase from my resume per se.
Oh, yeah, everything
But
can be erased. Maybe it's not a memorable match or something like that. But
well,
now, go on, go
yeah,
on.
yeah, it's one of those things, man. It's just like I said, it's not that it wasn't a good match. It's not that I'm not proud to have wrestled there and all of that kind of stuff. It's just I know that there's certain things that go on in the pro wrestling world. Like I didn't realize this at the time, but a lot of lucha style wrestlers, Mexican wrestlers, and things like that work reverse than U.S. wrestlers or you know other wrestlers. Luchas work everything in reverse. So not being trained in that style, you know, it is a learning curve there. But it's just one of those things, man. That's part of the wrestling business is you got to learn to roll with the punches. Good, bad, or ugly, you got to be able to push through and make the most of it. You know, that's part of it.
So how did you overcome that challenge?
I just got in there and done exactly what I knew to do and took the bumps exactly as I knew to take them and tried to stay as professional as possible to make the show go on as smoothly as possible. And tried to make sure the fans understood what they were watching, even though I barely understood what I was doing. You know, that's part of wrestling, man, is telling a story. And if you can get out there, and even though the way it goes is if the wrestler doesn't look confused, then the fans don't know he's confused. You know, if you get in the ring
Exactly.
and you have no clue what's going on, you're just trying to roll with the punches and go, 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 and you're not slowing down, you're not leaving any empty space to where it looks like you're just lost. You know, the fans they know none the different. And that's part of storytelling.
Yeah, and I can imagine that storytelling is such an important part of the whole Rika Wildlee story, because to
Definitely.
me you're like this kind of, not a fairy tale, but an adventure, a travel, something unique, and maybe just like not Pandora's box, but you're a little bit like an enigma. So how
Well,
do you solve that enigma?
you know, I've always enjoyed being a character. I've always said
Mhm.
this. There's a lot of wrestlers. There's millions of wrestlers, professional wrestlers.
Exactly.
There's millions of wrestlers, but there's not many characters. Now, I'm not talking about just throwing on a mask or putting on some tights and going out there and portraying it in front of the crowd. I'm this, I'm that. There's a lot of those, but there's not a lot that you can go in depth with as a character. Like if you were to go check my Facebook, there's a whole, which I'm not quite done with it yet. I still have a lot more to write, but there is a 3 or 4 chapter book on Rika Wildlee called Beyond the Big Top, the Rika Wildlee story. And it is the in-depths of how Rika Wildlee became the Barker of the Bazaar, how he started, how he this happened, from step to step to step. And now being able to portray that to the fans, anybody can wrestle, anybody can promo.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
the fact is, a character will live on past his days in the ring. Once my body is shot, once my back is too broken to be doing anything, people will still pay to see Rika. They will still pay to see the Barker of the Bazaar. Why? Because I'm a character. And that's what I give back to the fans, something that they have to hold on to, something to remember, and that is my whole thing. A character will outlast a wrestler hands down every time. So,
Exactly, but I think it's an interesting subject to make. We should probably dig a little bit deeper into that, because, as you were saying, there's a lot of good wrestlers out there, no doubt about that.
yes,
But there's
amazing.
not a lot of good characters.
Well,
So,
you think
so
about it.
how do you see this problem in the world of wrestling?
Well, I've talked about this on other podcasts before, but think about this. And I know most older wrestling fans, the reason that you got involved as a child, why? Because of the characters that you saw.
Ex-
You had people like Macho Man Randy Savage. You had people like Doink the Clown. You had people like IRS. Yeah, I mean, there's God knows how many numbers of characters that really drew you to professional wrestling. There's not much of that anymore. This is a whole new generation of wrestling fans that you know, we're having to step to, and we're having to show them a reason to get involved more, not just come and watch two average guys that can throw on some tights and beat up each other. you know
exactly.
Anybody can throw on tights and boots and get in a ring and throw each other around, but as a kid, as a child, you get up in the morning on Saturday and you watch your Saturday cartoons, and you're eating your bowl of cereal and you're doing all of that good stuff. Think about this. I am every cartoon character that they see. I am every comic book that they have ever read. You know, I'm giving them something that they see on TV and they see in their comic books and they see in the coloring books and everything else and in their cartoons brought to life. That's what I'm giving
Exactly.
them, you know, and that's what I want to do. I'm a character. So,
Exactly. And that's actually so fascinating, and that's why we reached out to you, because we want some unique characters on our podcast. We don't want
right,
the average wrestler, a good one. We want some characters to tell their story. But Rika,
understood.
let's go a little bit, let's talk a little bit about your writing the book of Rika Wildlee, the chapters that you have written until now, and
Well,
what can we expect in the future from that story?
I'm going to
Just a,
continue. I'm gonna give you some highlights. I'm gonna
Yeah.
continue on. I'm gonna continue on with what I've written so far, but it's basically just telling the story of how the Barker became the Barker and what it holds in the future. Because, like I said, I'm only up to chapter 3 right now. I'm in the process of writing chapter 4, but it takes you from the time. See, in the book, okay, we all know kayfabe is broken, but in the book, okay, it starts out as Richard Wildlee. Richard Wildlee. Okay, he is a family man, an average Joe. He has a 9 to 5 job. He goes out, he works, he does this, that, and the other. And he has a son, he has a wife, and they end up perishing in a fire. He tries to save them. Yes, he tries to save them. It doesn't work out for him. And this book that he always read his son every night before bed was called Beyond the Big Top, The Carnival Awaits. And he takes this book and it ends up perishing in the fire. His wife and kid perishes in the fire. He pushes on, he survived, and he hates on himself because he feels that he could have done more. He didn't have enough time with his family, he could have done more. And he goes out one day after, being depressed for a long time, and he goes into this store, and what sits on the shelf? Another copy of that book, Beyond the Big Top, The Carnival Awaits. He sees that book and it speaks to him in such a manner that he starts reading it, starts, crying and all of that. And he buys it and he takes it home. And every night before bed, he reads it himself. And then over time, he understands that the only way that he'll ever be able to be close to them again is to read this book, because that was their bonding, moment
Mm.
and things like that. And he reads the book, he goes to sleep that night, and then he starts getting basically haunted by a carnival in his dreams. He sees this big clown guy, like, called the Wonder. He shows up and he sees this guy and he starts talking to him, and he tells him, if you would like your family back, if you want to see your kid and your wife again, the only way that that can happen is for you to collect the essence of all the people that you wrestle and bring them to me to power the lights of the carnival.
Oh.
So he wakes up, he's freaked out, he's discombobulated, he don't understand what that dream was about. He's just like, he don't know what's going on. So he ends up over time looking into a wrestling school, and he continues to be haunted by these dreams. And over time, that's how he got into wrestling, because now he knows to the only way to keep the lights on at the carnival and get his wish granted by this character called the Wonder is to collect the essence of the wrestler. So every time he wins, he takes a jar and he takes a
Mm.
little bit of the wrestler's essence and he puts it in the jar and he puts it on the shelf at the carnival. And that's what keeps the light shining bright. As he loses, the light starts to dim. As he
Oh.
wins, the lights get brighter. And as long as he keeps powering the carnival with these wrestlers' essences, then eventually he will have his family back. And that
Oh.
is, yes, it's a very unique story. You'll have to give it a read sometime. That's just some highlights of it. That's like chapter 1 stuff. But I'm going to continue on with this story and give more. That's what I'm saying. It's more of a in-depth version of who Rika Wildlee is as a character. And that's what I want. That's what I want to give back to the fans. They'll be able to buy it at my merch table eventually when it's done. I'm going to
Oh.
get it published. I'm going to put it in, hardback and all that stuff, and I'll be able to actually put it out, and that's going to be awesome. But yeah.
It will for sure, because I'm when you're telling that unique story, I'm sitting here feeling that we're just scratching the surface of
Oh,
Rika Wildlee.
most
But
definitely.
Rika, do you have some? I know you've been on other podcasts, but not a Danish one, and not one across the pond, across the Atlantic
Right,
Ocean, and so on.
right.
Do you have some untold stories that you have not told anywhere else?
Yes, a few, a few.
Oh,
Okay,
bring
so
them on.
okay, so like I said, I've traveled to multiple different states and things like that. And seeing as I faced a lot of different opponents, there was a opponent that I faced in Arkansas called Chin Strap Jesus. He's probably about 6'7". He's a really, really big guy, just gigantic guy. And I went against him in Arkansas, and it's one of those things. I'm not even 6 foot. I'm barely 6 foot. I'm like 5'11", yeah, ish. Okay, so going against somebody that size, you really got to be able to think on your toes. And there's only so much that you can do to a guy that size and make it look believable for storytelling purposes. So I'm going out there and I'm beating him. I'm beating him up. I'm literally throwing my body at him. He's standing on the floor. I'm on the edge of the apron. I take off running. I do a front flip. I throw my entire body at him. He gets knocked down. I hit the concrete, and I get up and I look over and I see a whole bunch of kids in the front row. So I'm like, you know what? Who better to help me than all of these kids? So I
Oh,
get the kids to go over there and they hold down his arms and they hold down his legs. So they're holding him to the floor. There's like 6 or 7 kids and they're all holding this guy down. And I end up doing a moonsault onto him on the concrete. And it's
oh,
just like things like that really stick out in my head because who would have thought of that? Like, I see a bunch of kids there. Of course, I need help.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
help me, small kids. But yes,
What a story! Actually,
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
intriguing actually to hear that way that you could actually use the kids, because never heard of something like that before.
They enjoyed
That's
it. I enjoyed
unique.
it, and it worked out. So, I mean,
Yeah. But do you have one other story that you would like to tell
yes,
to our
I
listeners?
will. I will tell this story, and this is probably breaking kayfabe a little bit. And I don't know if I've spoke about this on other podcasts, but it is an amazing story and probably one of the closest to my heart. Um. Okay, so a lot of people don't know this about Gatekeeper, but when he come through the wrestling school, he had just beat stage 4 Hopkins lymphoma cancer twice.
Whoa.
Yeah, 2 times. He come through, his body was shot. Like genuinely his body from head to toe was just in complete utter shock because he was having to basically learn how to carry himself again from all the chemo and everything else. But we had that match in or in Texas, in Center Texas, the Singapore Cane match.
Hmm.
He carried himself like a true professional, even though his body didn't know what him was up. And being able to challenge himself to get in the ring and actually put on a banger of a match, knowing that he could barely walk in a straight line or he could barely do anything because at times he could almost never not stand up because his joints were shot from the chemo. He still had a port in his chest while
Damn.
we were wrestling. Yes, he still had a port in his chest from going to get the chemo and all of that stuff. And to see a true champion like him, you know, carry himself in a professional manner after such a life altering thing is one of the biggest things. He is an inspiration to me. Me and him's had an ultimate rivalry, but I can't say enough about the Gatekeeper because if he can do that, then there's no reason for me to gripe about anything. Like, who am I to say I can't do anything if this guy can beat cancer twice, show up in the professional wrestling world, first off, become a referee, get licensed to do that, And then second off, become a professional wrestler and get licensed to do that while dealing with all of his body functions and things like that. There's no reason for me to gripe, moan, and complain when this man is doing what he's doing or has done what he has done. So, yeah.
Exactly. But now we've been on a very unique journey, and you've taken us to, what can you say, far places in the
Yes.
world of Rika Wildlee. You have taken us to your town, my
Yes.
town. Maybe I'll see you here in Denmark one day. But
That'd be awesome.
now the stage is yours, as one could say, for some last words of this interview.
All right. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for having me on, and I'm going to let everyone out there know across the pond, across the world, know about the Barker of the Bazaar. I am Rika Wildlee. I am the Barker of the Bazaar. I am the brightest light you'll ever see inside the squared circle. I am the one who captivates curtain to curtain, and everyone needs to understand that I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok. I've got it all. So there's no way that you can't get a hold of the Barker if you see fit to. Now, the world of professional wrestling has only got a slight little glimpse of the Barker of the Bazaar so far. But with that said, I hope to make it across the world as far as I possibly can, to Denmark possibly. And everyone,
Hopefully.
when they finally see the bright lights and they finally understand the carnival and the big top has made it to their town, they'll see just the inspiration that I can be. And that is all I want to do inside the professional wrestling world. I want to draw in the next batch of colorful characters as they see to join the professional wrestling world, just as I have. That's all it is to it.
Rika Wildlee, thank you so much for being on our podcast. It's been a unique pleasure, a unique
Thank you.
story, and a really good insight into how important storytelling is in professional wrestling. And we
Yes.
always have these last words that we're saying in our podcast. Remember, you have to watch wrestling live. And normally I'll finish here, but this is a very unique message to everyone else. You have to go in and look up Rika Wildlee on every social media platform, and we'll drop
Yes.
some links below in the show notes to everything that you have. So please drop me a message with every link that you have.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
so normally we'll say it again. You have to watch wrestling live.
Yes. You have to watch wrestling live. Nothing